this match.
I mean, look at the time there. 30 seconds faster than their previous one. I was almost choking on my water by how fast it went. That was a crazy match for them.
They absolutely made a great amount of improvements off of the dungeon they did not very long ago at all in the upper final. So congratulations to Wunderbar making more critical improvements and just straight up Dranos making it so nobody's going to be able to catch them on this dungeon.
Yeah, this is why I thought this was a Wunderbar favored dungeon, because it was so clear how easy it would have been for them to shave 30 seconds off their time from before by just not having the tank go the wrong way. And so just by doing that, then all of a sudden that makes 30 seconds on their timer. Whereas for Golden Guardians, it was not clear at all what they could do to really shave that much time in one fell swoop off of their timer. I felt like they were at a pretty serious disadvantage here.
Yeah, I think last time they had they'd messed up the hammer earlier on, but we kept talking about how they were continuing to gain advantages. It was like a rare, like a medium rare bad, something like that. Wasn't too heavy, but let's start talking about those improvements that Wunderbar also ended up making through the replay.
Okay.
Mr. Dranos.
Okay, I see. I wasn't quite sure if it was replay time,
right
but it is indeed replay time. Yeah. So we had a little bit of an oopsie here for Wunderbar with Zalia going down. That cost him a battle res. Wasn't the end of the world, though. And it's just really hard to point out where in the dungeon things are going faster for them. Than Golden Guardians. It seems like it's just kind of the whole thing. All the way throughout this dungeon, they're just eking out a little bit more damage. And I really think that is the explanation here. It's just they're able to do slightly more DPS. They're slightly more optimized. They're walking slightly, better pathing somehow. They're getting in the right spots of the room before things end. It's not one big thing that is doing it in for the Golden Guardians here. It's Wunderbar is just a little bit faster in every single pull in the dungeon.
Yeah, and it just goes to show the difference it makes for these teams when they are able to play just that bit more aggressively and to get the job done. And we were talking about healer damage as well, seeing how Zalia is still optimizing for mostly gushing wounds, heavy haste, everything like that makes a world of difference over running over 40 corruption, but running versatility on the other hand. And we were kind of talking about that previously, Nagura, of when is it right for you to run with like versatile setups, very defensive setups, even if you can run over 40 corruption versus just running pure damage?
I mean, I still think that the versatile setup that JB is running can put out a lot of damage too, as we've seen on some of the boss fights, right? We've seen on Cujo, he was keeping up, or he was really close to Zalia's damage up until the point that Lydie basically just didn't put Cujo in the correct position. And then it's not really his fault anymore, because if there's no way for him to attack, then he just can't keep up with Zalia's damage if now that's put the boss in the correct position there. So I think it is very close with the two setups. It's just the fact that Zalia might just be playing more aggressively and saying, hey, I'm not going to heal you, use your defensive here, right? So I can do DPS. And that's really something that is also dependent on your damage dealers and on your group. The better you synergize, the more the healer can do damage if your damage dealers and your tank are using the defenses properly in favor for your healer's damage.
Yeah, and getting out of that early phase as well makes a world of difference when you're not having to constantly deal with that incoming damage. So looking ahead to map number 2, Zyro, we're going to be looking at Waycrest Manor, a dungeon that I believe it was Deplete from Beyond did in like 12 and a half minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a dungeon where we talked about it last time around. Because it's a tyrannical dungeon with 5 bosses, rather, sorry, fortified dungeon with 5 bosses, you're essentially just pulling 5 bosses that just happen to have 20% worth of trash each of them for your DKs to cleave down. You don't really do trash pulls in Waycrest Manor, so that's the only reason it's done so quickly here. And also the affixes aren't really that difficult for the players to deal with either. You know, that bursting, the DKs can just AMS themselves off, or even Death Strike through it if they have to, or just get carried by way of the crane. That works too. Yeah. In Volcanic, you don't really have to worry about that either. You just dodge it, forehead. So, you know, there you go. It's
you just heal through that with way of the crane.
In terms of, yeah, just heal through that too.
Exactly. I think we saw about a 10-minute run as well, but that was with Reaping, Stratno. So do you think it's going to be taking a little bit longer, considering that Awaken's going to be the primary affix here?
Yes, I do think that Awakened is a slower affix, especially in Death Knight comps, than Reaping was. Reaping is more of an accelerant than a speed bump for Death Knight comps.
Unless you play all 4 Awakened monsters with the last boss.
True. I don't think we'll see that, but I can't rule it out for sure. We haven't seen either of these teams in Awakened Waycrest yet this weekend, so it is a big question mark. We do know that very impressive 12-minute time was put up by Deplete from Beyond. It looked really, really, really hard to beat that, but if there's anybody who can do it, it would be one of these 2 teams, Wunderbar or Golden Guardians.
That's right, and a lot of those pulls we'll have to see as we talked about Raw last time, Zyro. Let's start talking about the Soulbound Goliath as well, since no matter what, like you mentioned, they're pretty much just pulling things into every single boss they can.
Yeah, and I guarantee you every single one of those wipes there is not going to be due to Soulbound Goliath on his own mechanics. It's usually something like a lightning strike hitting the boss and his fire debuff going off while you're also dealing with trash or some other sort of mechanic going off. The bosses themselves generally aren't that dangerous. It's just the added difficulty factor of adding those trash pulls in that's going to be a problem here. So we're going to have to keep an eye on how these teams are able to deal with those trash mechanics while they're pulling the bosses as well.
That's right, and we're looking at extra casts going off, and especially we've seen a number of times just extra debuffs that are going off onto players that have spits, and Dranos, you talked about last time how important it was to even look at pulling a little bit over 100% in case any infest casts go off as well.
Yeah, either you got to have a plan for it, right? You either are sure you're going to stop all the infest, or you have a little bit of wiggle room in the count at the end of the dungeon.
That's right. We've seen a number of times where that's, you don't want to have anybody backtracking to grab just one last mob. And we see times where teams have had to go upstairs into Waycrest Manor, find the first thing that they can kill, and just go after it immediately. And again, with these 2 teams, like you said, they've either got wiggle room or they're just so incredibly confident in their abilities to be able to take it down. And that's what we're looking for out of Golden Guardians right now, as there's down 1 in our grand final. So both teams are getting themselves prepared, and we're going to be seeing what they're going to have in order for them to kind of take it here, Nagura. I think it's just Golden Guardian need to kind of shake themselves out of it and not to think too hard on that workshop.
I definitely think they're able to do that. I mean, they're such a veteran team. They've been competing in the MDI for so long already. I don't think a loss like that will affect them too much. I think they're definitely able to just shake it off and just bring their A game for this Waycrest here.
That's right, and I know Dr. J is looking down on all these guys, giving them the J-Crest blessing as we get ourselves ready to go for the second round in our grand finals.
Yeah, he actually is. I just saw him put the eyes emoji in the
YouTube
chat.
Look at that timing.
That's crazy.
Alright, so we are in this Waycrest here, and we do see the same comp out of both teams. We see the double DK plus the Demon Hunter, so no Hunters at all in the setup. The Demon Hunter is here to buff the damage from the DKs because he has this increased magic damage. And look at the amount of damage Yoda was doing! Yoda did so much damage, I think he had aggro!
He had to have pulled aggro there. That's so unfortunate. Wow.
Oh my
god. And of course, the only reason he pulls aggro there is because of the build they're running. That Blood of the Enemy, Fell Barrage, on top of Merektha's Fang, they just do so much AoE burst. Even in Nod Skittish, it's really hard for tanks to hold aggro off of that, so you really have to make sure you trust your tank to hold that aggro there, and just Lighty not able to do it, unfortunately, there.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Both of the teams do commit their bloodlust as they're pulling a lot of trash. Both of the sides here with the Acolytes on top of the boss as well. So both of them are going to go up quite a bit of percentage while also dealing with this boss at the same time. So we all know how difficult this boss can be from the live servers, but no problem for those 2 teams as they're just bursting down the bosses so incredibly fast with the amount of damage they have coming out of those two DKs and the Demon Hunters. Now, one more thing about the Demon Hunters. Not only do they buff the DK's damage, but they also provide darkness, which is incredibly good for bursting, because it can just negate some of those crucial ticks when you have or more stats. On the whole team.
I think it's really interesting to look at this because we haven't really talked too much about the corruption that that our DKs and Demon Hunters like to run, but they're both just stacking some amount of versatility amplifier as well as expedient amplifier. So a lot of versatility percentage and haste percentage, just so they can get out as many globals as possible and be as tanky as possible on top of that. So with that added extra versatility, it's just so weird to see it, especially Demon Hunter, one of the tankiest DPS in the game, go down like that. But here we go again. Big pull coming out for Wunderbar here. Almost instantly AoE down by the DKs, doing between them a combined 6 million burst DPS, but all three DPS are down and the trash is still alive. They're gonna have to find a way to reset this boss, but even at that point, the DPS still aren't releasing, so there's no way for them to get back in time. I don't know what they're gonna be able to do here. They just now released, they're going to try to run back, but this is a disaster. Azalea also goes down, and I don't think there's any way now can keep himself alive here.
Disaster for both of the teams. Golden Guardians having a full team wipe as well as they died in one of their trash pulls right after Triad. Wunderbar going down as well. They had to have a complete reset. Now is still in combat with those trash groups, with the mobs that they didn't manage to go down. Sally actually almost went down here as the CC was being broken on one of the ads standing right next to him. They should be able to finish off this trash, which means they have less of a time loss compared to the Golden Guardians, because the Golden Guardians had a full reset, meaning all the mobs that they were fighting reset as well.
Oh, now
it was actually a fail.
Now dropped to 7% on the repull of this Matron on a Soulbound Goliath here. Now here's going to be the major difference here with these wipes that you like we were mentioning here. The DKs and the Demon Hunter committed all of their cooldowns to that pull, so they don't have them available here, and on top of that they don't have the changing to buff up their strength stacking trait here on the DKs here, so their single target damage is going to be significantly worse than what Golden Guardian has, because they just went for that same pull themselves and were able to pull it off. So their single target burst is going to be much higher. You can see that here, even though they engaged the boss at roughly the same time, it's 20% lower for Golden Guardians. So this is going to be a neck and neck game if they're able to play it clean from here on out, but there's still tons of dungeon left. After Soulbound Goliath, they still have 3 more bosses to get through.
Yeah, and I just actually rewatched what happened to Golden Guardians, and they didn't wipe to a trash pull, they wiped on a skip. They were trying to skip the witch, and one of them didn't get the Shadow Melt off, and therefore they had a full team wipe because all of them got in combat with that witch that got pulled. It's global combat, unfortunately.
Is that the same skip that they had deaths to earlier on in the tournament too?
I think so, yeah.
Jeez, that's rough, man. That's really rough. I mean, well, what can you say? It's really unfortunate for them that the same thing happened, but fortunately for them, the mistake on the side of Wunderbar was way worse. But we got to keep an eye on Golden Guardians here. Actually, both teams going for the same pull right here, pulling a lot of trash in. Keep an eye on those spit debuffs. All across the players, everyone getting absolutely chunked. The only thing keeping them alive is that massive Way of the Crane healing from both of their healers, and they're just barely able to keep everyone alive through it as the DKs once again go to work, bursting everything down. Perfect execution from both teams, but still just a little bit faster for Golden Guardians here because they did have that burst at the start of the boss.
This is such an incredibly difficult pull to pull off, and it's so risky. Look how low everyone is dropping this whole time. You have all the spits going out, you have the Gorgeous jumping, and then you have the burst doing applied to everybody. You see how Wunderbar is dropping low. Sally is almost out of mana, and the Thorn is going off on Frack. Did have to pop the cocoon on Frack to keep him alive, but now Sally is almost going down. With the Thorns from the Thorn Shaper going off on Sally, and now he's completely dry on mana. We need to finish off that pull. Force Sally to get some mana back. There we go. They did manage to do it now, but Golden Guardians, they're already done with the boss, and they're ahead in trash. 9% difference in favor of Golden Guardians here.
Can't take our foot off the gas pedal yet as we're now gearing up for another massive trash pull into Rawl the Gluttonous here. You got to keep an eye on those DK cooldowns. They are up for Lip, but they're not up for Shakib. But on the side of Wunderbar here, it's going to be yet another full team wipe. They just weren't ready for that pull after just barely getting through the Soulbound Goliath. Whereas for the Golden Guardians, no major issue for them. Just those bursting stacks on a few of their players. The darkness coming in huge there for them. I think it absorbed almost all of the ticks of bursting on JB, Lighty, and Yoda there. Insane from them. And they're just able to pull it off, where Wunderbar is just not having a great time here.
Definitely not. Just mistakes after mistakes. And to be honest, this might just be a chain reaction, because if you plan out a dungeon like this, where you do a huge pull after a huge pull, you need to line up your cooldowns and you need to plan ahead your defensives perfectly. So when they had that one wipe on their pull on top of Goliath, they probably mismanaged their defensive cooldowns and their offensive cooldowns, and now the things that they should have ready are not ready in the moment that they need them. And this is why they have these just chain reaction wipes after another on Wunderbar's side. While Golden Guardians, they had a wipe too, but only to a skip, so they didn't commit any defensive or offensive to that skip, and therefore I do think Golden Guardians is definitely the team that can pull this off without any more mistakes. I think they should be able to finish off their strategy in that Waycrest manner perfectly from here on out.
Got to keep an eye on the health bars here for Wunderbar here as they go for that massive pull again. Darkness coming out. Everyone's still alive from that Way of the Crane healing, and a majority of the danger of the pull is gone as the massive AoE burst comes out from all 3 of the DPS players. Looks like this time around they have got it down, but the boss is already dead for Golden Guardians. Again, they are just so far ahead because the magnitude of their deaths were just not as important as the ones that Wunderbar had. I mean, they're going to have to full wipe again in a much more massive way in order for Wunderbar to come back. I feel like we're talking about this workshop again here. Just the lead has been established at this point, and it's going to be hard for them to come back.
Yeah, they're really far ahead at this point. It looks like they're playing a double obelisk here on Golden Guardian's side. So they're playing the Tank Buster plus Samrak at the same time, and they're going to use the Nyaloka Realm to get down to Lord and Lady Waycrest. Now, the one thing Wunderbar might be able to do to catch up to the Golden Guardians here is to skip the obelisks and play 4 Awakened mobs to the last boss, as we've been talking about before the dungeon started. But that is insanely difficult, and we haven't seen any other team try to do that at all, just because of the way the last boss works here. It's incredibly difficult to even just play 2 Awakened mobs there.
Especially your Growthbreaker of Heroes here in this no hunter comp, not having that pet taunt in order to alleviate the tank damage. This is definitely like the most efficient one to deal with there. If they were worried about like travel issues, they could have gone with Samrak in that kitchen instead, but they ended up going with Urgroth just to make sure that the tank didn't have to worry about that Spirit Breaker damage taken increased debuff later on in the fight. I think the 3 Awakened mob pull is more than fine to deal with, especially with this massive AoE burst comp that they're running. They can just cleave it on top of those horrors in between Lord and Lady Waycrest and Gark Tool near the end of the dungeon. And they should be able to burst through with Bloodlust, but we know how dangerous that can be there. There's just so much residual AoE damage going off. But here we are, gearing up once again for a massive AoE pull. All of the trash in Lord and Lady Waycrest's room, or adding on a Matron as well, just for good measure, letting them stack up those bursting stacks so that they can cleave that AoE onto Lord and Lady Waycrest when Laddie's ready to pull it down.
Alright, so they didn't decide to do the double obelisk after all. Wow, so we will see the triple obelisk pull for Golden Guardians. I thought they would do the double one. Looks like Wunderbar is dealing with 2. So Wunderbar definitely doing the double Awakened obelisk pull, while Golden Guardians chose to only do that tank class, not right. So riskier strat by Golden Guardians, even though they are the ones being ahead. So now they are fighting Lady and Lord Waycrest. They dealt with the trash already. As you can see, the huge DPS numbers coming out of the 2 DKs here. Looks like Yoda didn't have any offensive cooldowns available to him. That's why he's he was just focusing the boss. But yeah, just huge control. And you also see Lydie jumping around to make sure that he's lining up that spell reflect perfectly.
You gotta remember that 5% of the DK damage is attributed to Yoda as well, because he's amplifying their damage. So really that Demon Hunter is doing way more damage than the details meter suggests there in the top right of the screen. Really helping out there. Even though not the Felbrows from single target. Love that. Love using that ability efficiently. It'll be back up for later on, since it is only a minute cooldown, so they'll have that available too. And yeah, just incredibly efficient with their pulls here. It is unfortunate that this is going to perfectly clean run for them, but you got to be happy with the way they've pulled off these massive pulls here. With only 1 left in the dungeon, they're looking to take this second game, and that's pretty impressive considering both of our previous grand final matches between these two teams were quick 3-0 matches. This is going to be the first ever series between these two teams that goes longer than 3 games.
I love it. I hope it's going to go to a 5-game series. This is just such an incredibly close grand final that we're having this weekend. All of those matches are so close, and now we see those 2 teams, just the best of the best, fighting against each other. And Golden Guardians, they're about to down Lord and Lady Waycrest. And as you can see, the percentage here, they're almost done. They have the 3 obelisks that still give them percentage, and then they also have those horrors. they might even be pulling them on top of the last boss if they're feeling risky.
For sure. I feel like they have to go for it here, because if you don't go for it and Wunderbar does go for it and they're able to pull it off, you've essentially just thrown the match. So here we go. The horrors are pulled. They're waiting for them to stack up before they move into the boss here. And here they go. I wonder, is Yoda going down to take these first charges, maybe with a nether walk, just to make sure he doesn't go down? It looks like that's what it is. There we go. First charges out from the Gloom Horde. Gorak Tools engaged. Bloodlust is popped. It's all going to come down to this pull for Golden Guardians. If they're able to pull this off, they will secure this second round. Let's keep an eye on those interrupts of Void Dweller Malthus. That's probably going to be the important thing, but also have to keep an eye on the fears from Samurai Beckoner of Chaos. This could be bad. With the burst coming out, just cleaves through everything. The horrors are down. The awakened mobs are sub 30%. It looks like they're able to pull it off.
Definitely dealt with those horrors incredibly quickly. Now they're finishing off Samrak, and there we go. Samrak going down, so the fears are not actually going to go out. You can see the animation still, but it's not going to go through because Samrak is down. Now it's only Void Weaver left. Vlad also went down, so therefore they don't have the pools on the floor anymore that are going to make it more difficult. And Void Weaver is actually a lot easier for this kind of setup to deal with for them, because they have Quadra melee interrupt. With the double DK and Demon Hunter comp, they have a lot lower cooldown on their interrupt compared to the Hunter comps. So they should be able to interrupt all of the Void Weaver casts. We saw one go from JB here, but he was fine as he was using one of his self-defensive keys to stay alive. And there we go, they're at 100% trash now. They only have 30% HP left on Gorak Tool, which really should not be any issue for them on a fortified environment.
Wunderbar has now also engaged Gorak Tool, but they need some extra deaths to come out from Golden Guardian to have any chance of catching up, because they are also 20 seconds behind due to those death timers. But with only 20% HP left on Gorak Tool, it looks like Golden Guardians are going to be able to even out this best of 5 grand finals to a 1-1 score and play a relatively clean match. Yeah, they wiped to a trash skip. And I mean, honestly, it makes that run from Complete from Beyond early on look incredibly impressive, but you've got to love taking a game off of one of your most bitter rivals here for Golden Guardians. Very impressive to see that here.
That's right. Golden Guardians bouncing back and not going down without a fight there as they take that Waycrest Manor, stick into it. And like you mentioned, Zyro, there's been a number of times these teams have been facing up, but generally it's a sweep one way or another. So big congrats to Golden Guardians, making sure they're going to keep this one close. And Dranos, they're going to be fighting it tooth and claw for this one.
It's so hard to win 3 games against Wunderbar, but Golden Guardians are taking a very important first step in that process here. Man, a lot had to go wrong for Wunderbar there, though.
True. And we were able to kind of see firsthand, you know, we talked about it. Oh, yeah, it's going to be great to see all these teams rushing headlong into each of the 5 bosses, trash in tow and everything, but it also show there's so much that can go wrong in this one, Nagura, and there's so many risks they have to take.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're just preying on some of these pulls that they do in this Waycrest manner. They just like pull everything on top of the boss, and then they just pray that they're just gonna survive, because there's just so much damage coming out on the whole group. And I think Casalia was doing 400k HPS at some point in this dungeon, so they're just hoping for some of the darkness to save them and not having to heal all of those bursting stacks away and all of the spit debuffs. And I don't know what other damage is coming in here. It's just incredible what kind of pulls they're trying to pull off here in this Waycrest.
Definitely, it's an absolute mess. Stratos, let's start breaking down where those wipes started happening for Wunderbar.
Oh yeah, let's just take a look at. It's really rare to see these teams have these kind of mistakes, so I don't feel bad showing just a full replay of all these different awful things happening to either team here. Of course, we had that death from Yoda on the very first boss. That looked like it was going to be the big mistake of the match so far, but then we had the Soulbound Goliath, huge bursting stacks on the whole team, followed by a Soul Thorns, causing pretty much a full wipe that led into a full wipe for Wunderbar. Golden Guardians had this other problem here. Nearly called them their old name, where the same trash skip actually that got them last time got them again. So that is something that maybe they need to work on, because that is 2 out of 2 times they've been in Waycrest where that particular skip has gotten them. And then we had just this brutal pull onto Rawl the Gluttonous. And as we talked about, it's not the Rawl that kills you. It is all the trash. All of those mistakes added up to be just enough to allow the Golden Guardians to come into this last boss fight with a huge amount of extra time to their advantage, and that, coupled with their ability to kill the boss with 3 awakened enemies, let them secure the win. Although again, it was only by like 30 seconds or a minute, and those mistakes on the side of Wunderbar were very large mistakes. It is hard to count on a team of the caliber of Wunderbar to make multiple of those mistakes of that degree of severity in a dungeon in the future, so it is a really scary position, I'd say, for the Golden Guardians to be in.
Most definitely, and it does just go to show, we talked about it before, Zyro, about, J Crest Manor and Dr. J looking down, but nobody is the king of J Crest Manor but Dr. J. But there is another reward that will be coming around for a lot of these teams, and while we would have loved to have this at an in-person LAN to be able to show the rewards for these teams, not only the big prize pool, but also these amazing medals that we have affixed perfectly with the Eye of N'Zoth. These look heavy. I really wish they would have sent these to us. We could just do a little modeling for them before we maybe return them.
I like that idea.
Else. Yeah, it would have been great.
I want
Send
the
one
golden
to Italy
one
as well. Me too. Let's
I kind of like the logo on the silver one a lot, though. I like that.
Well,
one.
I assume
I
that's
think
front
that's
back.
Yeah,
that's
might
the
be
back.
the back.
Totally, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I do like that a lot, though.
I wonder if those eyes of N'Zoth are googly eyes or not. I hope they're googly eyes. That would be ideal.
That would be perfect. Petition to make them googly eyes before they
Yeah.
get sent out for it. Just put the little sticker there on it. It'd be perfect. But those are going to be sent out to our champions as well at the end of this. So we're going to be making sure that they get them properly rewarded, and hopefully we'll be able to get a bunch of pictures of them showing them off soon as well. So lots of very cool rewards going to be coming up for this. We for our grand finals, as with Waycrest Manor done, we are going to be moving into King's Rest, Zyro.
And you got to remember, this is a best of 5, which has essentially been boiled down to a best of 3 now, with them tying it up at 1-1. So King's Rest, Motherload, and Freehold coming up here. King's Rest, we've seen insane
so
runs.
much.
Insane runs. It's hard to think what could be done to make it even better between these two teams, because this is another one of those dungeons that's for the most part been figured out. They know the best strat, but there's a lot of execution-based things you can do in this dungeon.
There is, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on both of these teams. I think that's kind of some of the glory of this map pool in many cases as well, Dranos, is that there's some room for innovation here and there, but man, there's just huge execution tests for these guys.
To be fair, they do have different King's Rest strategies from each other. We know that Golden Guardians plans to... they pull the construct on the bridge, and then that allows them to pull trash onto Shadow Zul and skip that 5-pack later, whereas Wunderbar just zerg down that 5-pack and then skip all the rest of the trash on the bridge and that interment construct and go right into Shadow Zul by itself. Earlier on, it looked like Wunderbar's strategy was faster there, but that may have just been due to them being able to apply more damage rather than their pathing being better. I'm not sure. We'll see.
And as we gotta look at it, let's take a look at our Golden Serpent. It's usually one of the nicer bosses. Really, nobody's wiped to it, Nagura, so shouldn't be too bad.
I think the reason why no one has wiped to this boss is because there's actually no way of pulling a lot of trash on top of this boss. The only thing there can pull on top is the construct. And then it's really difficult to wipe if you don't have multiple trash packs on top.
Yep, thankfully, and usually most groups they just have the entire room to be able to work with. Very few lives ever end up getting claimed on the boss, 0.18 on average, so really nothing too much to worry about. We're going to be looking at pretty much just end boss to decide who is going to be able to survive this, because there's been so many of those obelisks coming in at the last boss. We've seen a number of times, Dranos, it was Wunderbar really that was just saying, okay, we're just going to start focusing down King Dazar and start cleaving everything down. They took forever to kill some of those ads.
Yeah, Wunderbar just has this incredible ability to assign their damage to whatever they want to, but it looks like we are about to get underway here in Game 3 of our Grand Finals Best of 5.
Alright, so we know that they already have a little bit of a different start here. Golden Guardians Oh no, this time around they actually changed up their strategy, because I'm pretty sure Wunderbar was dealing with those minions of Souls before they were going to this trash pool, but this time around they decided to skip them. As we do see a whole rune pool probably gonna come in by both of the teams. Last time around, Wunderbar almost had a full wipe here, as only Junjin and Fragment were alive.
Oh, a couple of minions as well got loose there for Golden Guardians there, and you can still fixate on JB here, but they're able to cleave it down underneath, so that was a little bit of an interesting start of the pull. Both teams going for this massive pull, but Lighty has gone down, and they're going to have to instantly kite this out to have any chance of resetting the pull, but they have to get a res onto Lighty there. Fortunately, he died after he leaped out, so they're able to line of sight, use those pet tank uptaking abilities to get in. This is going to be a massive damage loss for them, and JB also gets hit by one of those deathly chills here. So much damage going out here, they're going to have to find some way to fix this, but no problems for Wunderbar here. The pull's dead for them.
Yeah, Wunderbar actually having no issues at all. Now he's not going to go out and do those two constructs. And there's a full team wide for Golden Guardians, as it looked like one of the Shadow Bolt volleys maybe went through on the whole team, and everyone just went down. It's such a difficult pull to do for those teams, and if you have your tank go down, it's so hard to recover. Because once the tank is back up, even though they did manage to get the battle rush off, you need to get the aggro back, and you need to get to reposition the ads. And it's just so difficult to do, even though they do have misdirect by the hunters. But Beastmaster with misdirect is just not as good as Amaris and the hunters do at tricks from a road.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I think it might come down to not all of those minions as well getting dealt with right away there. They had to sort of spread out, make sure they dealt with them there, and it just kind of screwed up their positioning at the start of that pull. You could see that there was some kind of exodus. People were running in different directions there, which is not what you want to have happen at the start of the pull, especially when you're trying to do that line of sight strat around the staircase. So unfortunate to see that happen for Golden Guardians here, and because they didn't really deal with any of the trash significantly, they're going to have to somehow find a way to gather up this same trash pull again if they want to somehow keep the dungeon competitive, because you know Wunderbar is not going to have, we said this before, they're not going to make the same mistake twice in 2 dungeons. So here we go. Golden Guardians gearing up again to go in for this pull, but it looks like they're just going to play it safe. It looks like they just can't go for it.
I think this is a very smart reaction by Golden Guardians. Even though they know they're behind this time, there's no reason for them to risk a pull when they know they don't have the defensives available. As you can see, Lighty almost going down to this one pack alone, as he does not have Last Stand or Shield Wall available to him. So there's just no way they can pull this whole room again. He's trying to stay alive as he's padding backwards. But one thing to note is that it's actually raging actives, and both mobs, they are raging by themselves already, the champions here. And hunters cannot actually dispel 2 raging effects at the same time. A druid's Soothe is better than a hunter's effect of dispelling the raging, and the druid one does dispel 2 or multiple raging effects, while the hunter can only dispel 1. So even with 3 hunters, you cannot dispel all of the raging effects off of these pools that they're doing.
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure. It's just rough to deal with. That's why you see the common strategy would be tank them until raging, and then, alright, tanks out of there, I'll see you guys. Hopefully you kill the rest of the trash before they get to me, or we're going to have some issues. And we're seeing that still be the strategy here, even in these smaller pulls that Golden Guardians is going for. That champion, once it enrages itself a couple times and it's in that raging affix, it's rough to deal with. But they're able to deal with it this time around, like you mentioned, just the raging dispels coming out one at a time from the hunters. But they're so significantly behind here. The boss was dead 20 seconds ago for Wunderbar, and Golden Guardians still have yet to engage it, so they're going to be a solid 3.5 minutes behind or so. Knowing this boss takes on average about 2 minutes to kill. And on top of that, it's just still not an easy execution either, especially if you're tilted from having an early on wipe like that. Knowing that these Guardians do so much damage to your tank on top of the damage that the Serpent does, it just makes it more difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, the only thing Golden Guardians can do is hope for Wunderbar to make a mistake. They have to continue their strategy. It's very, very difficult to make up time in King's Rest. I mean, we've seen them play against each other earlier in King's Rest, and Wunderbar did make a mistake on their very first duel. But it wasn't as costly as the mistake Golden Guardians made. So Wunderbar did manage to catch up to Golden Guardians by just playing their pulls very efficiently and executing them well, but there's no way that he can do any sort of bigger pull or do any sort of Hail Mary strategy. Because he's already played for Awakened Monster with the last boss anyway, so it's not like he could skip another obelisk or something like that. And yeah, there's just very little room for doing riskier pulls or getting more time here and there.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like we talked about this yesterday as well. This gauntlet is the most soul-crushing thing as a competitor. Knowing you're behind and you've wiped, because every single bone and muscle in your body is saying, we gotta go fast, we gotta go fast. But then you deal with one section of the gauntlet and the dungeon's like, okay, we can pull the next trash back and looks at my watch, 15, 20 seconds or so. And yeah, just go ahead and take it easy for a second there. And you're like, no, we gotta go fast. So it's gonna be torture for Golden Guardians for the next 4 or 5 minutes here as they deal with this gauntlet, but they're gonna have to somehow try to find a way back into it, and that's gonna have to be in the form of some sort of major mess up for me.
Yeah, unfortunately I don't think there's any other way for Golden Guardians to come back, as Wunderbar is now fighting the last trash pack in this gauntlet. Once they finish off these 2 mobs, the gate will open and they'll be able to move on. We do know that Wunderbar is skipping the construct on the bridge and go immediately to the Machimba room and are dealing with those fluids and the construct in that room, while Golden Guardians is playing the construct. So a little bit of a difference in strategy, but it amounts to basically the same, because Wunderbar does have to do a pull later on in the dungeon, while Golden Guardians doesn't have to pull as much as them. And now we see Wunderbar moving on, doing that skip as I've been talking about earlier.
Yep, for sure. See that same skip, Zalia taunting it to the side. He's going to Transcendence back while the rest of his team runs by, and then he'll Shadow Meld the aggro off. Pretty normal skip at this point while they set up for this massive room, more than likely going for just about every single thing in the room while they AoE down with that Hunters. You gotta keep an eye here. They're gonna wait for those first Entomb casts to go off. Once those both go off, then they'll pull these 2 constructs into the boss and cleave it down with Rapid Read.
Yep, there we go. They are about to gather up everything. Now, the one thing that they cannot do is pull those constructs on top of Machimba, just because those constructs are casting the Entomb ability, as you can see, and Marish is being put into the tome and Sally getting him out. And you can't really do that while fighting Machimba at the same time. That's why they're pulling the constructs first. They wait for the Entomb cast to come out of those constructs, and once Entomb went through, they are pulling Machimba afterwards.
Yep, looks like, oh, that Entomb cast starts casting. That could have been a problem for them, but just barely able to deal with it here. And they need to finish this construct off before the boss's Entomb goes off so that they can spread out effectively to get people out of this next Entomb. Waiting for that Drain Fluids to go off so they don't get another one of those flame patches on the ground. Here comes the Entomb. They need to instantly get this person out. That looked like it was pretty slow. He stood there for a while. It might have been fast enough. I wouldn't expect them to mess that mechanic up. We'll see if the Burn Corruption comes out here. If it doesn't, it looks like they've done it properly, and they'll only have to deal with Machimba with no mechanics, just the melees on the boss, and it looks like they've pulled it off. They're just going to deal with this large Patrick encounter here on 21 terrain.
Yeah, definitely looks like they pulled it off. Now, if they don't manage to do the Entomb strategy, so Machimba stops casting abilities, it doesn't make the boss impossible, but it's a time save to do this strategy, just because you can do more damage. Even if you have a full Hunter comp that don't lose any damage from moving out of the fire, the healer loses damage and the tank loses damage from having to move out of the fire, and then the boss doesn't move immediately, and then he's gonna be unattackable for a little while, and stuff like this just costs you precious seconds that is so important for the MDI, and this is why they are playing this kind of strategy here.
Yep, for sure. So it's not going to be that much of an issue for them to deal with Machimba unless now gets crit a few times, which could be painful. They have so many things to deal with that. The thing is, you don't really want to have to use cooldowns here, right? You want to save them up for the next big pull right afterwards with the Berserkers, as well as so much magic damage coming out from the Hex Priest. It can be a lot of damage to deal with. Golden Guardians just now getting through the gauntlet, and you can see based off of the boss timers at the bottom, they killed Golden Serpent 2 minutes and 40 seconds slower than Wunderbar here. They have a lot of ground to make up, and they're not going for the same skip that we saw out of Wunderbar, it looks like. It looks like they're just pulling this construct in.
Yeah, it looks like they're going for it. Now, this construct is actually really hard to move, just because of this beam cast that you see going off right now. This is a really, really long cast, and it goes through walls and everything. So it's, first of all, really hard to move, and it's impossible to dodge this beam if you're really far away from it. So it looks like they are finishing it off after all, while Wunderbar is moving on now. And this can be a very dangerous pull that they're about to do here, just because there's so many dangerous casters and the Berserkers on top. So gotta be very careful that they interrupt the correct spells and use the defensives on now properly.
Yep, for sure. And we've seen a lot of issues happen on this particular pull for a lot of teams here. There's a lot of residual damage going on if you don't get all of the interrupts on the priests here. There's so many caster and single target abilities. Poison Barrage being one of them from the Beastmaster. Just gotta keep an eye out, especially that frontal cleave from the Raptors. Any one of these abilities going off could be a disaster here. You see Ragna's getting hit by the Deadeye shot. They're getting knocked back, taking half of his HP, but no other damage coming out. And the explosives being dealt with perfectly. Great execution from Wunderbar here. Textbook from them.
Yeah, that was actually incredibly well done. And then on top of that, you also have Raging, right? That's why we saw the binding shots come out of the Hunters at the very end, when the mobs were Raging, to be able to just make the pull a little bit safer. And give now some breathing room, starting to kite away once they're rooted. Now we see them actually adjust their strategy. Okay, so I really like this. They know how far ahead they are, and they're actually dealing with Void Weaver now. Usually we know that they can skip this Void Weaver and play all 4 obelisks with the last boss, where they basically just use the obelisk as a skipping tool, while 2 of the hunters stay in the normal realm, go all the way to the boss, and get everyone out while not having to deal with Void Weaver. But because they know they're so far ahead, they're actually just finishing off Void Weaver, so they only have to fight 3 obelisks with the last boss.
Yeah, super safe play. You love to see in dungeon changes made like that to give yourself, instead of a 95% chance of success on the final boss, now have like a 99% chance. Not having to worry about those interrupts is a huge deal, like you mentioned. So I love this, just like you. It's just the right play to make. This is what's going to win you the tournament if you have any mistakes later on.
Yeah, and I love this too, because I remember in the last year's spring final, we talked to Wunderbar Gingy, and we asked him a bunch of questions, or we asked the team a bunch of questions, and we basically said what they do if they know they're really far ahead or really far behind, if they adjust their strategies, or what their voice comms is like. And I remember Gingy saying that they don't actually adjust their strategy at all, even if they know they're ahead. They basically just said, we want to just play our strategy no matter what happens, because we're confident, and we practice that strategy, and that's what we want to do. But I like to see that they adjusted this mindset, basically, because if it doesn't cost you anything to do something that will make your strat easier, I really think that is the way to go. So good to see that they changed up their strategy and actually making it a little bit easier on themselves, just because they are this far ahead.
Well, and that's a really interesting observation, and I think it's great to see them sort of grow from that, because I think at that time in the spring finals, they were undefeated. They never lost a match at all. They had won all 3 cups, and they never dropped a series. And I think when you're the people that are doing that, you're okay to have that confidence to do that. I think this shows massive growth, not only from them, but from their respect for this Golden Guardians team. They know if they make a mistake, Golden Guardians is good enough to come back from that and capitalize on that, so they do go ahead and make that adjustment on the fly. It's definitely very telling of the respect that these 2 teams have for each other.
Yeah, definitely. And we did see one of the severing axes go off here on Gingy, because he did not have Turtle available. So had to out-heal that debuff instead of just completely deflecting it with aspect of the turtle, which is a little bit unfortunate, but no problem for Zalia being able to out-heal that huge damage debuff that goes out on this boss. As they're now fighting Zanazel, one thing that is a little bit annoying here in Zanazel with the totems is that they actually spawn explosives with this affix that we have. So usually we see the teams just completely ignore most of the totems, but because of the explosive affix, it could spawn explosives all over the place, and therefore we see teams basically just dealing with the totems instead of just leaving them up like we see them do with other affixes.
Oh yeah, the totems are definitely one of the more dangerous portions of this fight in general, even without the explosive affix. Also, something that a lot of people don't know as well, just a little tip for live keys for you. If you have a fire mage in your group, hold the boss on top of one of the totems. That ignite can cleave, and if it's a combust ignite, it'll solo the totem on its own. Little tips for you.
You do see Wunderbar is dealing with Akali now, so last boss, Golden Guardians did manage to catch up to the same boss now, but because it's a tyrannical environment, this is just a really long fight. You have to fight all 3 bosses, and all of them just have such a huge amount of HP, and there's no way to speed this up. You just have to chew through each boss's HP, so even though they are the same boss, Wunderbar is still a whole boss ahead, basically, because once they finish up Akali, they're going to be done, while Golden Guardian still has to deal with Zanazel and Akali afterwards. And they also have the 4 obelisks, right? So on the last boss, they will be a little bit slower because they still have to deal with Voidweaver, while Wunderbar did deal with that one already.
Oh yeah, for sure. Kali going down here for Wunderbar means that they are heading on to the rest of the dungeon here. If I remember properly, they actually have a different route than what we see from Golden Guardians here. I believe they deal with this 7-pack of mobs here instead of just pulling the 3-pack into Shadow of Zul. That looks like it's correct. They're going to be cleaving this down. Again, this is a dangerous pull, very similar to the first pull on this bridge. You have to make sure that you're getting all of the interrupts on the Hex Priest here, as well as trying to tank as many of those severing blades with your pets as possible. If too many of those blades go on your tank here, they could very easily go down, just like that. Gingy going straight down. Looks like that was some sort of frost blast from a raging mob. He just instantly got one shot, 100 to 0. Very dangerous there. It's not going to be enough to get Golden Guardians back in, but it's a start, right? 5 seconds on the board plus a little bit less damage. But in a 2.5-minute lead like you have from Wunderbar, you need more to go wrong to let Golden Guardians back into the game.
Yeah, it can be unlucky with the raging timing here because the Frost Shock is an instant cast. It cannot be interrupted and it goes on a random target. And even though they do have 3 Zeus to get rid of the Enrage effect, but if it happens at the exact same millisecond that the raging effect gets applied to the Witch Doctor, then there's just no way to dispel it before the Frost Shock goes out, and they can just one-shot a person, as we just saw. So definitely a little bit of RNG hitting them there, but it's only a 5 seconds timer, and he could release right there as the spawn point was there. Now they're fighting Shadow of Zul, and once they're done with this one, they only have this 3 awakened mobs left to do, and then they will reach that 100% trash that they need.
So the insta-soothe coming out from the Hunters on Shadows, so we'll want to make sure not a single Raging Shadow Barrage gets off on their tank. Otherwise, now probably just get one shot insta-gived from 100 to 0, so great to see them having that execution there. Although it's not necessarily difficult to do, just making sure you're on point to get it down is important. Insane stat there at the top of the screen there. Wunderbar has a 66.67% win rate in King's Rest. 2 out of every 3 King's Rest they play, they win in. That's definitely impressive. Gearing up for this 3 awakened mob pull. Not as dangerous as 4, obviously. We do know how to do math, but they still do have to keep an eye on these Fear Circles from Samrak. We've seen mistakes on this very boss from Wunderbar back in the cups. There was a really badly timed Fear with a disengaged from Gingy on a leap slam from King Dazar. Instantly one-shot him. Got to keep an eye on those debuffs from them here.
Yeah, definitely have to keep an eye on that. And they're not playing dwarf racials on their hunters like we usually see from hunters in King's Rest. Dwarf racial is something you can use to get rid of the fear debuff from Samrak, so not something they have available to them. You do have the turtle to get rid of the fear, and they also already use Zalia's revival to dispel all the fears at once. But Revival down and Turtle down on Fragments. They still have it up on Gingy and Maris. Definitely want to make sure they use it in the correct moment. Because if you get feared into one of those hunting leaps by Ribbon or any other AoE damage that happens on this boss can definitely be very deadly.
And I think with Samurek down, the major breaking point of the fight is done for them. They can just pet taunt the rest of their Spirit Breakers from Urgroth Breaker of Heroes. And at that point, the only thing left for them to really keep an eye on is going to be those deathly roars from Tazala. If one of those goes off at the wrong moment and a couple of their players get feared into tornadoes or get feared into a quaking leap from the boss, they could go down. But the thing is, they still have 2 battle reses available to deal with those issues. It's going to take a catastrophic failure of a level that I don't even think Wunderbar is capable of in order for them to lose this map.
Yeah, it's very hard for them to wipe here, to be honest. Also, they still have those 2 battle rests available, right? So even if something goes wrong, they should be able to recover. And as you can see, the percentage just say 96%, but it's indeed 100% because Shadow of Sul does not get counted onto this observer view here. But it did get accounted for them in-game, so they do have the 100% trash that they need in this dungeon to win. So once they finish off King Dazar, they'll be done, as Golden Guardians just now engage King Dazar on their side. So it's too little too late. This wipe early on in dungeon just cost them so much time. But it's not over, as this is a best of 5. So after this win, they still need to win 1 more to win this grand final.
Yep, the series isn't over after this map, regardless of who wins, so we still have more games coming afterwards. But you really have to hand it to Wunderbar. Coming back from that very scary Waycrest Manor, being able to play clean in King's Rest, which is one of the most mechanically difficult dungeons to deal with in terms of damage taken over time in the dungeon, you gotta hand it to them. They are the masters of King's Rest. And I also want to give it to Golden Guardians too. You can look at some of these timers. They're able to claw their way back a little bit into the dungeon and pull themselves to within 2 minutes of Wunderbar after losing 2.5 minutes at the start of the dungeon. It's definitely impressive, but it's just not going to be enough here, as Wunderbar just do not let up when they have that lead. And they're going to be taking this King's Rest and putting themselves in map point to take this entire tournament.
There it is, last percents winding down as Wunderbar, not too far from their best time that we've seen, getting a great performance in on King's Rest, and stats don't lie, they are absolutely phenomenal when it comes to this dungeon, and Dranos, they're 1 away from winning the grand finals here.
Yeah, this is all going to come down to the next map, and maybe the map afterwards, but that is the position we're in this tournament, mathematically.
That's precisely correct. Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean,
Thank you, Dreadnought.
Zyra's been a little shaky on his math lately, so I'm glad I can depend on you.
This is just so impressive, though. These 2 teams battling it out. Like the level of play here from both of them has been very high. Although I am surprised by how many of these games between these 2 teams is filled with wipes. I feel like there's only been 1 or 2 clean games between these 2. You know, they put up a lot of great maps against other teams, but against each other, it seems like there's always something going wrong for at least one of these teams.
Yeah, I think it's just testament to the nerves, maybe it's testament to the pressure to it, but it is kind of odd as well, Nagara, looking at the lower semis or lower finals coming up, and you're like, oh wow, those are so insanely close, and then it's just how aggressively these teams are being with some of these polls that there's just such high potential for mistakes to be made.
Yeah, and I think it's just the dungeons as well. I mean, King's Rest is such a dungeon. If you make a mistake, such a costly mistake, as stated there in the very first poll, it's just impossible to come back. There's just really nothing you can do to make up any sort of course, there's small things you can do here and there, but nothing that can make up 2 minutes of your time. So that's why it looks so one-sided in this dungeon, because of this full team wipe they had at the very start, unfortunately. I do think the next game, though, Metalode, even if there's going to be mistakes like that, there's definitely opportunity to come back in a dungeon like Metalode. Maybe not King's Rest, but Metalode, definitely a dungeon where you can catch up.
That's right. Now, let's talk a little bit more about that King's Rest as well. I mean, the talk of Adranos, that big wipe.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it all happened, was right at the very start of the map for Golden Guardians. Lighty just getting bounced around when he was trying to kite out. Those tornadoes in just such a bad spot. They rezzed him, but weren't able to then recover the pull, ended up full wiping. Great adjustment here by Wunderbar to kill Voidweaver Malthair. We've actually seen this done once before this weekend as well, when you realize that your opponents are way behind. Just killing an extra awakened enemy makes it so that then when you're pulling this last boss, it is a far easier version of that fight. Not having Voidweaver Malthair here, that one is actually one of the most deadly on this fight with this composition, because the interrupts are so taxed from having 3 hunters instead of classes with shorter cooldown interrupts. And these hunters don't even play the Skitra bow, they play the N'Zoth gun instead, so they don't even get the incidental cooldown reduction from that corruption proc that you'll see a lot of people on the live servers using.
So why is that, Dranos? It's been the topic of constant debate.
So part of it is here in the MDI servers, you just have access to actually anything you want. So you can play the N'Zoth gun at 485 with whatever corruption you want. And you're not in a situation like you were in the live servers until recently, where it was really hard to just find all the stat corruptions that you wanted to. However, even on the live servers, people tend to play the Skitra bow still. It tends to be a little bit better on single target, whereas once you start getting to full AoE situations, that's where you just need that cooldown reduction effect so much less, because you get all of it that you need from your rapid reload crate.
Gotcha, okay. So as we're looking at it, Motherlode could be the final round of this tournament, Zyro. Golden Guardians is facing the wall at this point. They've got to be able to pick up a win, and we've already seen how strong or how quickly, really, I would say, these dungeons can go for both of these teams.
And I mean, you got to think Motherlode is a great map for Golden Guardians, right? We've already seen a blazing fast time from, I think it was just about 15 minutes for them, only really surpassed by Deplete from Beyond in their last match of the day against Perplexed. So, man, this might go to a game 5 here. I don't think we've seen the Motherlode from Wunderbar yet, though.
I don't think so. I think we only ever saw it during the regular Cup season. So I'd imagine it'd have to be one of those dungeons that they've been playing quite a bit, but since they haven't really been playing a lot of dungeons just in general because they've been winning out so easily, Nagura, we haven't really seen the full breadth of what they're capable of in some cases.
To be honest, I think Motherlode is actually one of those dungeons where Wunderbar has had some issues in the past. I remember them losing quite a few games because they had some wipes in the R&D wing. I remember them pulling some trash there and having a full wipe and losing the game because of it. And then I also remember them wiping to the 4 obelisk kiting strat at some point, where they was just snapping back to the group, and it was Grievous as well, and then they just had a full team wipe and they lost the game as well. So I think Motherlode might not actually be the best map for them.
Oh, that's the case, and it could put them in a position where Freehold is the final dungeon for the series. We could go the full depth of the 5 games. So what do you think on this one, Zyre? Do you think it's going to be in Golden Guardians' favor, or is it just too up in the air as to who wipes first?
I think similar to that King's Rest, it's all going to come down to who executes this first pull better. We know that Golden Guardians likes to go for this extremely volatile first pull where they pull 7 of the addled thugs on top of 7 peacekeepers. And if those thugs get too many charges off on the same person, you're just going to get 100 to 0 instantly. And the fact that they're able to pull that off consistently enough to make it their strat shows that they have supreme confidence in it. So I think if they're able to pull that off, they should be able to take a victory here and send us to game 5.
All right, well, we'll see. Another round of stats coming at us for Mogul Razdunk as well, Dranos. On average, not quite 1 life claimed throughout a lot of this.
Yeah, Mogul Razdunk, the last boss here of the Motherlode. It's another boss where you see a lot of deaths here and a lot of wipes on this, a surprising amount even, but really that is due to the fact that 4 or sometimes 3 awakened obelisks are either being fought alongside him or kited while fighting him, and that really increases the volatility of that fight.
And we've seen, different teams going with different setups for how they wanted to handle it. Now let's see, as the grand finals are getting into their 4th round right here, as Wunderbar is facing their championship, facing their destiny potentially as Mudload gets going.
And I want to give a big shout out to Aya here for those stats as well. Even though she's not on the desk with us, she's still behind the scenes helping us make the broadcast as effective as possible. But here we go. We're going to see this big pull from Golden Guardians. Are they going to be able to pull it off?
We love Aya. And yeah, we know that Golden Guardians is doing this huge pull, as Zyro just mentioned. So the Bloodlust is being popped by Golden Guardians. And you see just all the Peacekeepers swarming in on top of all the thugs. It's an incredibly difficult pull, because if there's any sort of double or triple charges going off on one of the hunters or a JB, then they're definitely going to go down. This is not only difficult, but also it requires some RNG too. Thankfully, the hunter pets actually can get charged by the thugs as well, so they actually have 7 possible targets for the thugs to charge to.
This looks dangerous from Wunderbar here. This is not how this pull is supposed to go. You're only supposed to get Peacekeepers when this happens, but it looks like they have addled thugs and assassins in there as well. But it looks like they're able to deal with it efficiently. It might even be what they planned on doing. This is not the normal thing that you see from most teams going for this Peacekeeper strat, but somehow they're pulling it off, and they've already engaged coin-operated crowd pummeler. You see, a lot of times people go with this strat, they have issues with it, but I spoke too soon as Fragments goes down to that static shock, plus some residual damage. That might have been a grease gun from a mech jockey, but I don't see any mech jockeys in there. I wonder what that extra damage was from. Was it the charge? Was that? Wow, that's really unfortunate timing, because it looks like they were trying to cleave down the thugs before they even engaged the boss, but that thug was at like 1 HP.
Yeah, that must have been just a little bit of a mistiming here, pulling the boss slightly too early or missing a little bit of damage on that thug, and then you get the charge right before the static pulls of the boss, and it's just too much damage to heal, and there's just no way for him to use Turtle if he's already in that stun of the thug. So nothing that they could have done there other than killing the thug earlier or pulling the boss later. So a little bit of a mistake by Wunderbar here. But Golden Guardians did manage to pull off their first initial pull. And look at the percentage. They're up to 44%. Mara's going down for Wunderbar now. So another mistake by them. They don't have any battle rests left. So they have to finish off this pull with only 2 DPS, or they need to reset the boss.
This is going to be a full team wipe here for Wunderbar, and this is the worst case scenario. We've talked about this before. It happened to Ethical earlier on in our tournament. Once this resets, you no longer get the double trash count that Peacekeepers give from mech jockeys and the Peacekeepers themselves. So this is essentially going to be all she wrote for them, because we've seen how good Golden Guardians are in this tournament. And even to that aspect, Golden Guardians, I think, were already ahead. They already had more trash count and were further ahead on the boss. And yeah, you can see Wunderbar here. They're just, you don't have any strategy at that point. You have to just go for whatever you can get in range of.
Yeah, this is horrible for Wunderbar. Not only the time that they lost, but as you mentioned, not getting that extra percentage from the jockeys, because they're already piloting the Peacekeepers, and there's no way to tag them. And we do know that if something dies without any one of your group DPSing it or just using any sort of ability in it, you do not get count from it. And therefore, it's no way for them to get the jockeys count. And that's why they have to do these weird pulls that they didn't plan on doing. Well, Golden Guardians, on the other hand, they're up to 50% trash already because of this huge initial pull that they pulled up at the very start. And they're already done with the first boss as well. And now they're pulling the whole area. Look at this crazy pull that they're doing. They're pulling all of the extractors, all the Earthshaper and Sapper packs together.
And just so you guys know, one of those power throughs can do enough damage unmitigated to just one-shot one of the DPS. The fact that there are 3 or 4 of them in there, look at the damage going out on Lighty. And he had an Eye of Corruption on top of him, on top of Rock Lances going through. He goes down. JB also goes down. The Hunters are going to have to find a way to kite out this pull, but we've seen so many times in the past, this pull is almost impossible to kite out because you start getting errant Rock Lances, you start getting errant damage on players in the group, and your tank has to somehow find a way to go back in and gain aggro on top of everything, but there's not any easy way of doing it. Those throw rocks are coming out. It looks like somehow they found a way to stabilize, but Lighty just has to get out of there. He doesn't have any cooldowns active.
Yeah, there's just no way for Lighty to tank this anymore at this point. Lighty going down again. This might be a disaster. They're trying to finish it off, but Shakib is going down. JB is going down. This is just a chain reaction. They can't release because they killed the first boss already, so they do have to respawn there. But this some of them are already resetting. You see them trying to cut it out and trying to stay in combat with it.
They get the tags. They somehow get the tags before they reset. That's huge. That is huge. Wow. And with the amount of things left alive, I think they should be stable here. They did feed 8 deaths to that. That's 40 seconds on the board. Fortunately for them, it looks like the mistake made from Wunderbar is going to be significantly worse than what they just did. But that was a very scary moment. If that pull had managed to fully reset there, we could be talking about a very close game here.
Definitely. I mean, they did manage... I mean, that was so big that they got the tag before they reset, because otherwise they would have had to do that pull one by one. There was no way they could have done the same pull again. So thankfully they managed to not have the pull reset. They managed to just keep releasing, going back in. It amounted to 8 deaths, so definitely a time loss for them, but not having to do the same pull again is huge for them. And I think the biggest reason why Lighty actually went down here in this pull was because he had double or even triple Corruption Eye spawn on him. And having all of this damage from the ads going in on top of also getting the corruption damage was just too much for Lighty to handle. But thankfully they managed to recover, and now they're engaging Astaroth with some of the trash on top as well.
Yep, and as difficult as this pull would seem, I think it pales in comparison to the first 2 pulls they pulled off in this dungeon.
Yeah.
It's still nothing to laugh at. You have to keep an eye on those Earth Ragers, which should be dealt with for the most part by the Conflict and Strife Major that Lighty is likely running, keeping everything Thunderclap rooted underneath the boss, which lets the Hunters easily beast cleave everything down. It looks like that's the play here, and wow, that's an incredibly efficient way to deal with that trash. And wow, they got Azaroth down to about 65% at the same time here.
Yeah, very well done by Golden Guardians, and look how much trash they already have. They're up to 85% on their side. We do know that they're kiting the Obelisk, as far as I'm aware. I might be wrong on that one because we've seen some different strategies coming out of those teams. But no, it looks like they're actually playing the Obelisk with the last boss. So we saw them play 4 Awakened mobs with the last boss the last time around. So we'll see if they continue this strategy that they play the Awakened mobs with the last boss, or if they choose to change their strategy and kite them, because they're already up to 87%, meaning that if they would kill the Awakened mobs with the last boss, they're basically done with the trash. They just need very little on top.
And actually, I spoke too soon. He's not running Conflict Major. He's running Nullification Major, so doesn't have that Thunderclap down. All they did is they just threw some bindings down, had a leg sweep come out from JB, and just cleaved everything down easily. That was incredibly impressive control and damage from Golden Guardians here. I gotta keep an eye on this here, as Wunderbar is on their heels. They do have significantly less trash percentage, but they haven't gone anywhere. They're still progressing in this dungeon, keeping the pressure on Golden Guardians here. They cannot sit here and rest on their laurels. They still have a lot of dungeon left. They have 2 bosses, as well as, like you mentioned, that 4 Awakened mob pull on top of Mogul Razdunk that can go horribly wrong.
Yeah, definitely. And Wunderbar, I mean, with only 47% of trash that they have at this point, they definitely have to deal with the trash between Rixa and the last boss, and then probably go with that kiting strategy. But yeah, definitely it's still a lot of trash for them left to do. And it is teaming, so each trash just gives a little bit less count because there's overall more trash available in the dungeon. And now Golden Guardians skipping to Rixa, we do see them just run through the trash and now using the Feign Death and Shadow Meld to be aggro. And I think they might need some more War Machines to pull on top of the boss, but then they should be done. So after these War Machines, they can just go to the last boss, and they're done with their Awakened mobs that they're going to be pulling on top of the last.
Yep, for sure. And this is the similar pull that we saw earlier from Golden Guardians here. The double War Machine on top of the boss, letting the Hunters activate the rapid reload, getting that aspect of the wild cooldown up as efficiently as possible, making sure they do the most single target damage possible. This is going to make this single target tyrannical boss last a lot less time. Of course, they have a lot of ways of dealing with Rix of Flux Flame. That spell reflect can do a lot of damage, but you got to keep an eye on Lighty here. He's taking a lot of damage from this trash. JB really has to focus some extra healing into him. They've got to be efficient with this Propellant Blast, making sure they clear the platform for themselves, because that is the name of the game here on Rix.
Double Thing from Beyond spawning here, unfortunately did have the cloak active available to get rid of those, but yeah, they had very little space in that corner. Sometimes if you don't position yourself properly with that frontal cast, you can leave very little room for you to be able to move around. And then on top of having the War Machines as well, it can be very dangerous. But they did finish off the War Machines now, and they only have Rixa left, which really shouldn't be an issue for them. This boss sometimes can be dangerous for prot warriors just because Rixa basically only does magic damage, and on top of that she also applies this magic debuff, but it can be dispelled, but it applies too, and then one of them needs to be dealt differently, either by using Spell Reflect or using any sort of immunity to mitigate it.
For sure, and not any issues at all coming out from Golden Guardians here on Rix of Flux Flame. Of course, we know that final percentage is going to come purely from the Awakened Obelisk they pull with the final boss, likely going to employ the use of that Awakened Obelisk skip. That debuff does a lot of magic damage to Lighty, as we see the Monk Bubble coming out from JB to keep him alive. Didn't have the Spell Reflect available for that, but he should have it for this final one going out, which should finish off the boss for Golden Guardians here. Wunderbar still gearing up to do that same pull, the double War Machine pull on top of Rix of Flux Flame here, just kind of making sure they're going through the motions just in case something catastrophic does happen for Golden Guardians, putting themselves in a situation where they could eke out a win if that mistake happens. That's the correct play here. Of course, when you're in the grand finals, you want to give yourself every opportunity to win. All eyes, though, are going to be on Golden Guardians as they move towards Mokul Razdunk and look to send this series to a Game 5.
I think they're playing the obelisk here, and I like this a lot, because they know they're this far ahead. The last time they played Metalode, I think it was yesterday, they played all 4 Awaken mobs with the last boss, but they know at this point, we're far ahead. Not only is Wunderbar just now on Rixa, but they also still have so much trash left to do. So let's play it safe, go and play Samrak, because Samrak can cause so much issues on top of having all of the other obelisks as well. So another safe play by Golden Guardians here, adjusting their strategy to have only 3 Awaken mobs to deal with on the last boss.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I love this. They're doing the same thing as the King's Rest, like you mentioned. They're just playing it safe. This is fantastic play coming from Golden Guardian, making sure they secure themselves this victory. Both teams showing, I mean, we talked about it in the King's Rest, showing that level of respect they have for each other, knowing that they want to go for the 100% efficient play, making sure they win at all costs here and send this game to a Game 5 match, which should be a banger. We have Freehold coming up for our Game 5. But we're not quite there yet. Golden Guardian still needs to execute on this pull with 3 Awakened mobs alive. They do need to cleave down that Void River Mouth here quickly. They only have the 3 ranged interrupts as well as a tank interrupt to deal with it. The Bloodlust is popped, however, here.
And this can be so dangerous, because not only do you have the Awaken mobs, but the boss's abilities need to be dodged as well. We have the Gatling Gun go out, which can be really hard to dodge when you have the pools on the floor from the Blood of the Corruptor. And then on top of that, you have the Dark Fury, which is a huge area of denial. And then you also need to dodge the missiles from the boss. So definitely not easy task. And you see, this boss is really hard to move. And now he's standing in the middle of the pools from the blood. And it's almost impossible for them at this point to dodge the Gatling gun. So they're trying to just run through the Gatling gun, using some of the defensives they have available to them to mitigate it. But they're slowly but surely getting down these Awakened mobs. The blood needs to go down soon, though, so the room is not going to get filled even more with all of this area of denial.
Oh yeah, and of course, once the blood is down, the room clears up, everything becomes much easier to dodge, and I think that's the main danger of this fight gone here. Just got to keep an eye on those positions. JB getting hit by one of the... Oh man, I don't know how that doesn't one-shot him there. You got to be punished for making mistakes like that in the grand finals, but fortunately enough for him, it doesn't end up happening. Don't have to waste that battle res, and they are able to somehow move through. And the important thing is they have their healer here. They're not going for the kite strat. They have that healing available for this intermission phase. We shouldn't see any deaths to those drill smashes, but we've seen issues happen on Mogul even with the healer here.
Yep. All they have to do is naturally dodge the smashes. They gotta call Dr. J and ask how that works. As they are now in the intermission phase, and yeah, intermission phase definitely can do a lot of damage. Not only do you have the smashes that just have a huge burst on them, but you also have these the mobs that you have to deal with. Usually we have Lighty just soak the mechanic that they're casting, the Heartseeker, so the damage dealers don't have to take that extra damage on them. But sometimes it can... sometimes they can jump in a weird position, and then it's really hard for the tank to soak both of them at the same time. But it looks like they dealt with one of them already, and then it shouldn't be a thing of a deal. But you keep actually dropping incredibly low far from that smash. Did manage to survive, though, with the acceleration that he had available.
And this is crazy what's going on right here for Wunderbar. They're going all in on this strategy, but we know that they weren't planning on doing this strategy by looking at their gear. Usually when teams go for this strategy of kiting, they all have rebooting bit bands, which allow them to heal each other every 15 seconds, but they don't have that right now. They have the overclocking bit bands, which give them haste whenever they do certain things. We can tell just by looking at their gear that their strategy coming to this dungeon was not to have their healer kite the mobs, but they have to go for it here to give themselves any chance of coming back and winning this dungeon. That being said, Golden Guardians is already through the intermission phase. They're sub 20% on the boss right now with nothing but a little bit of a health bar standing between them and a Game 5 in this Grand Finals series, and it looks like they've done it. They've pulled it off. Even though they had issues with that trash pack after the first boss, they were able to somehow put it all together and play well enough to send them to a Game 5 in one of the best series I think we've ever had in the MDI.
Oh, it is all tied up now as Golden Guardians takes the win in that Munload run with the last couple seconds start winding down on the clock, but not going to be able to do 50% in 5 seconds, so Golden Guardian takes the victory, and Hey, we started talking a lot, Zyro, previously about gushing wounds, running versatile setups. That extra damage that JB took, almost died from. Hey, versatility was there to be able to save. Yep.
Yeah.
Secret Infusion, when he pops it with Rising Sun Kick, giving him a huge versatility buff, giving him 40-50% damage reduction fairly regularly. It's enough to save him and make sure that you don't die to any of those, any of the damage that goes off at the very end, Ratnos.
Yeah, I mean, that was close for sure. I think they may have still been okay even if he went down to that, but it would not have been ideal.
Yeah, exactly, and especially when there's that much pressure on them, and they have a little bit of an idea of where their opponents are, but they really just got to make sure they're focusing on what they're doing. So very well played by them, and it puts us into a round 5, probably the closest and the tightest we've had for a grand finals in MDI, Nagura.
I'm so excited to see a 5th game here in this series. And it's just so perfect that it's on a freehold too, because freehold is this dungeon we've seen so many times already. So many teams love playing freehold, and they just refined their strategy from cup to cup, always just innovating, getting new strategies. And we always see different stuff coming out of the teams as well. I think to this day, people don't have their best strategy, right? There's not one strat that everyone plays, just like in some other dungeons. We see every team just have something different. Some of them are kiting doublers, some of them are playing them with the last boss, some are pulling trash on top of the last boss, some are not. So I really like freehold as the deciding game in this best of 5 series.
That's right. Before we get into it, let's start talking about some of those highlights and really just some of those deaths that came out as well, Dranos.
Yeah, so the Motherlode is just so much relies in this dungeon upon that first pull being executed correctly. When you wipe on this very first pull of the dungeon into the first boss, it sets you back by such an absurd amount that even if something like what went wrong to Golden Guardians does go wrong, this size wipe, this size disaster for them is so small in comparison to the first pull going like that. So all in all, that's just really where Wunderbar fell so far behind. Credit to Golden Guardians here. Like we said in the King's Rest, this strategy here of killing off an extra awakened enemy to make the last boss fight safer is so smart when you see that the other team has had such a big disaster. And that was all it took here for the Golden Guardians to force a Game 5. Game 5 in this matchup between these two teams in Freehold as the final game of Battle for Azeroth in the MDI, I could not have picked anything better.
Oh, without question, that's going to be a great dungeon for all of us to be able to see. There's going to be so much on the line for these teams that have constantly been rivals, that have constantly been battling it out. You know, Zyro, when it came to the Spring LAN in Australia last year, we saw Method NA take it, now Golden Guardians. At BlizzCon, we saw Method EU, now Wunderbar taking that championship now. It's insane how close these teams have been competing to each other and for how long they have as well.
I mean, this is a rivalry that goes back years at this point, right? Both of those series were 3-0 in the favor of either team. The last time we can go back to a series that was this close, you have to go back to the MDI 2018 Global Finals, where Shell's Angels took a very close 3-2 win over Method NA. They've been around for forever. This is ridiculously close, and I can't think of a better way to end off the BFA MDI series with a best of 5 going to a Game 5 between these two teams.
That's right, seeing the full scope of how these teams are going to be able to perform. Checking out the maps, we've seen back and forth through tournament, and now Freehold with Fortified, Bolstering, Grievous, going to be our decider. And oh my goodness, let's get some predictions out of this one, Dranos. Who you got to take it all?
I think Wunderbar's got to be favored in this dungeon. I think their strategy's better, and I think that they're going to win.
All right. Nagura, who you got?
So we've seen both of the teams already compete in Freehold, and as Stratno said, Wunderbar did have the fastest strategy, so if both of them play perfectly and execute their strat properly, it should be Wunderbar that wins. But looked like it really wasn't their best day today with those mistakes they made in Motherlode and the mistakes they made earlier as well in the Waycrest, so
yeah, I mean,
maybe it's Golden Guardians.
When we saw Golden Guardians take the win last year at Summer LAN, you know, we had talked to Wunderbar previously, and they said that they just weren't really feeling it. Unfortunately, we don't have them in person with us. So, Zyro, who you got? Do you think that they're having a bad day, or do you think they're going to be able to pull through on this?
It's such a hard thing to call, but I think I agree with you to a certain extent, Jack. I think the only time that we ever see Wunderbar make mistakes to the point where they've made them in a couple of the games this series is just when they're not on their game, and I'm feeling it. I'm going to go with Golden Guardians here. I think they've just got it today.
They have absolutely been capitalizing on their mistakes. They've been forgetting about mistakes and moving past them very frequently. And it's going to come down to last boss, Harlan's Suite. Lots of obelisks going to be coming in on this one, Dratnos. And generally not as lethal of a boss as we've seen in other dungeons.
Yes, well, it still wiped teams a
On
solid
average,
13%
sure.
of the time. And those, yeah, I mean, some of those wipes have been iconic and heartbreaking to watch, but absolutely, it is a boss that really lends itself to fighting for obelisks at the start because it doesn't really do much at the first part of the fight. So you can safely deal with those obelisks while it's busy, while Harlan himself doesn't really do much at the start.
That's true. And, we've seen just from the beginning how this dungeon, one of the first dungeons we've really been able to experience in BFA, has had so much experience, innovation, experimentation, everything going into it with how flexible teams have been, not only with Reaping over the years, but now with Awaken. It's all going to come down to this, our grand finals, with a winner taking home $150,000. Let's get into it. Our final round in Freehold.
All right, let's see what those two teams can do in this last game of this best of 5 of the grand final. Both Wunderbar and Golden Guardians popping that Lightfoot potion immediately as they start the dungeon, and they're gathering up a huge pool right at the get-go. It is bolstering, so you definitely want to be careful on how they manage the damage on these mobs.
And it's all going to come down to, like you mentioned, that bolstering management and whether or not Wunderbar is going to be able to execute their strat. We saw the peak efficiency of Golden Guardian strat earlier today when they were able to put in just a barely sub 13-minute run. Now, we do know that they can probably eke out about 20 to 30 seconds of time by going for that cannon barrage on top of the final pack that they opted to just DPS down earlier on. So maybe they can put a time up that's way closer to what we saw from Wunderbar. But Wunderbar, with the sub 12-minute hot capability run in this dungeon, it's like they're just this giant Hulk standing in front of you saying, do something. And Golden Guardians are going to have to do something to win this game.
Yeah, definitely. And the Golden Guardians are already fighting Sky Captain Craig. They only dealt with that one pack they need to deal with to spawn the boss. Because we do know, as Tyra said, that they have a completely different strategy, those two teams. Golden Guardians is going to deal with the obelisk, with the awakened mobs on the last boss. And they're also going to pull trash on top of Harlan's Suite. So throughout this whole dungeon, it's gonna look like Golden Guardians is ahead in dungeon speed, but Wunderbar is actually gonna deal with a lot more trash before they reach the last boss. So it's gonna look like Golden Guardians is ahead, even though this is gonna be a lot closer just because of the different strategies that those two teams are playing.
For sure, and this is actually going to put them very similar in terms of trash counts. We know that they like to do this. They actually changed their strat, Golden Guardians, from earlier in the Cup. We talked about this last time they played Freehold earlier today. They've changed their strategy in order to be more efficient on this first boss here. So, oh wow. Oh, Lip got hit by the bird here after getting shot by Sky Captain Crag, instantly 100 to 0'd. He is going to be able to release once Sky Captain Crag goes down, so it's not the worst death in the world, but because of that, they're going to have a little bit less damage on this trash, and it's going to take them more time to move on to the dungeon. Very unfortunate to see there. And on top of that, 5 seconds on the board for them. He is able to release right where the boss dies once it goes down, but that's not what you want to see at the start of this dungeon when you know the other team has a ridiculously fast run.
Yeah, and it looked like Wunderbar is moving on first because of this death that they had, even though Wunderbar is already ahead in trash percentage. So yeah, not something you want to see. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of pressure on both of those teams here, being in this grand final. 2-2 match, just the last game, the last chance both of those teams have to win this whole thing. It must just be an insane amount of pressure on those teams. But they are veterans and they should be used to it, so they definitely should be on their A-game here and just perform well. As they're moving on to the next boss, we see Gingy is moving away from the team because he's going over to the Ring of Booty to start that event.
I mean, you have to think about the pedigree of player on these teams. Across the 10 players that you see on your screen right now, 8 of them have world first raid titles under their belts. One of them was a competitive player in Yoda in multiple other games, and JB has been part of the top end. Well, Oh, Zalia also was a competitive player in another game. JB himself has been part of the WoW scene for over 10 years at this point, playing at a high level, even being in Blood Legion back in the early days. Every single one of these players has some stake on why they're here, on top of just currently being some of the best players in the game to play in the MDI. You'd think that the nerves would go away at some point, but they really don't when you're in a situation like this.
Yeah, definitely. And now we see Wunderbar, they are about to finish off the boss a little bit faster compared to Golden Guardians because they reached this point earlier. We do see some trash being pulled on top as well on Wunderbar's side. It is bolstering, so that's why they delayed the trash pull, and they still want to use the friendly effect that they get from this boss. You just get this buff that increases your damage, or it's a debuff that does damage to the mob. So that's why we do see the trash being pulled on top at the very end, even though it is bolstering.
For sure, and you can see from both teams, somehow, some way, Golden Guardians managed to clean up their pull and finish it before Wunderbar. Must have been good RNG with Bad Brews there, because they were definitely behind on boss percentage HP, but they managed to careen ahead here, and they're just getting ahead in the dungeon here. I feel like that's the only way they have a chance of pulling this off. We know that they like getting that extra trash percentage with Harlan Sweet later on, so even though they're 8% behind in trash, that's not going to be that big of a thing in the grand scheme of things. And this is exactly what they needed to have a chance of coming out ahead here. Going straight into massive trash pulls here, and actually a little different sort of way to do the pulls here. Usually we'll see teams go in and do the Ludwig pull like we're seeing from Wunderbar here, but it looks like for Golden Guardians, they hadn't quite spawned Ludwig yet, so we'll see if that's something that messes up their routing later on.
Yeah, there was actually a little bit of a difference I noticed. So Jinji went to trigger the pick, and then he came back, and he also pulled the trash on top when he came back. And then before they finished off the trash, that's why I think Golden Guardians finished their boss and their pull faster, because Marist left before the pull was actually done to do the pick, and that's why Ludwig was already here as they got here. So tiny little things they actually are doing differently here between Wunderbar and Golden Guardians that change up their strategy a little bit. Golden Guardians, though, they are dealing with the trash faster. You can see they're up to 38% now, while Wunderbar is fighting those crashers and Ludwig that, of course, do take longer to get down, but they also leave a lot of percentage once they are done.
Yeah, and of course the percentages shouldn't matter. You shouldn't keep too much of an eye on the percentage here, because the differing trash pulls are just being done in different sequence here. It's really going to be about who deals with all of this trash around Trothek's room before the other one. So even though the percentages might be in favor of Golden Guardians now, and then it's now going to be in favor of Wunderbar since they've finished their trash pull, you really have to keep an eye on the overall progression here rather than just what that number at the right side of the screen says, or left side for Wunderbar rather. Keep an eye on it here, because this is going to be what sets them apart here, how efficiently they're going to be able to deal with this trash here. Those two crushers going on top of Trothek here are going to be the efficient engine that lets the hunters do most damage possible, but they're already engaged in Trothek. I mean, like you mentioned, it's just pure dungeon progression here. I think whichever team ends up getting to the final boss first, regardless of strategy, is going to be the team that takes this series here. Obviously, Wunderbar has a little bit more of an advantage because they only have to worry about the boss itself, whereas Golden Guardians are going to have to cleave the boss down. But Lighty has gone down at the end of the trash pull. That's an extra 5 seconds on the board, as well as the reawaken cast time. Not what you want to see here. I mean, Golden Guardians, they're already 20 seconds behind just due to death timers.
Yeah, I mean, this is really not what you want to see. I mean, we had the early death on the first boss, and then we have Lighty going down twice, and now they're up to 4 deaths, 20 seconds timer. Even if none of those deaths actually caused too much of a time loss in the dungeon itself, because there was no major resets or anything like that, but still just the amount of time they lost from the deaths themselves and having to rest them back up is not something you want to see in such a close game in the grand final, best of 5 last game. So yeah, they really need to shape up, and they need to make up some time somewhere if they want to win against Wunderbar, because Wunderbar on their side, they're having a perfect run. They have 0 deaths, and it really looks like they're on their way to move to the last boss right after Trothek is about to go down here.
Yep, and Wunderbar, we know where their last trash percentage comes from. They've got one more trash pull that they have to pull off, that they get the rest of their trash from those painful motivation casts at the end of the dungeon, and then Zalia is off to the races while the rest of his team deals with Harlan Sweet. It's going to come down to execution. Does Zalia have the nerves of steel in order to pull off that one kite to win $150,000? I think he does.
Yeah, there we go. They are on their way to that last boss area. Now, we do know they do a very interesting Ravager pull here, where they end up seeing some of the Ravagers kill off the rest of the trash, and then trigger the Ravagers at the very end. So first they're dealing with this Ravager pack here, and then they'll move on and do some more trash.
They just have to make sure that they don't take too much damage here from frontals from the boss, and they should be totally fine. Keep an eye on Zalia. The Dampen Harm is popped just so he can take enough damage to gain healing threat on all 4 Awakened mobs. And after he's gotten that down, he should be off to the races. Even standing in the pool to get more healing threat too. That's another impressive play here. There shouldn't be any threat issues from those hunters at all here.
Yeah, they really did everything they could to get the aggro on Zalia here. We saw the misdirects come out of the hunters, making sure all of the mobs are being misdirected onto Zalia, and then he was standing there just tanking some of the melee hits before he did transcend to the bridge, just making sure that he's got aggro for sure, and there's no way of them snapping back to the rest of the group. And now all eyes on Zalia. We know how Howland Suite works. We definitely don't need to see them play that boss because it really should not be an issue at all for now and the 3 hunters here. But Zalia, look how close his blood is actually going to Zalia here. What a close run. He should be able to survive 1 melee attack by the blood, but it can be very dangerous for him. So he needs to watch out, especially with the offensive build that Zalia is running, right? We know that he's running that gashing build instead of the versatility.
And we know that he has to cut it that close purely because Urgroth is a very slow kite pattern. He casts those Dark Furies. He has to make sure that he's kiting slow enough so that Urgroth can go around. But all eyes right now are on Wunderbar as Harlan Sweet crosses that 30% threshold into the double damage execute phase. None of the hunters is in any major danger. Fragments does have a 3-stack of Grievous, but that's not going to have enough time to kill him with the boss now in that double damage phase. Wunderbar, Zalia has pulled off the kiting strap perfectly for you here. All it's going to take is a little bit more damage to finish off this series, and it looks like we're going to have Wunderbar winning our final MDI finals in this Battle for Azeroth season.
Wow.
Flappable Wunderbar taking the grand finals victory, the $150,000 grand prize, and establishing themselves as the dominant team for Battle for Azeroth's Mythic Dungeon International. Dratnos, they just completely shattered any sort of conversation about them not having a great day. They've had a phenomenal weekend and are rightfully our champions. Absolutely, and they made sure that they did not have any sort of issues whatsoever. Dratnos, did you enjoy that or what?
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself there.
It's okay.
Yeah, that was awesome, though. They were able to put it all together in a flawless run. I was really happy to see Wunderbar able to have that happen. Unfortunate for Golden Guardians, though. You know, they've also had a great season here in the MDI, and that was a few games in a row where, well, not in a row, but a few games in this series where things went pretty wrong for them, and it closed out in Freehold with a pretty sloppy run too. So unfortunate showing for them, but really a great season for them too. And I don't think that they should be too disappointed losing to Wunderbar. Wunderbar look like they are just on another level compared to anything we've seen ever before in the MDI.
Without question, and you know, it talks about the depth of the competition for the MDI and how strong it has gotten. Let's start talking about those mistakes, though, that unfortunately cost them the Freehold.
Yeah, you know, there was not too much strategically that looked bad from Golden Guardians. It was going to be interesting to see whether or not their strategies matched up with Wunderbar's, but we didn't actually get to see a perfect run out of them. We got to see Lighty getting hit with that Azurite powder shot into the bird combo, and then rough bolstered harpooners here. We've all seen this before where you just have somebody sitting at full health, and then all of a sudden that harpoon comes out, and you know, they're just yoinked right out of this realm of existence. And you saw it happen to J.B there. There's really just not much you can do when that's happening to you. So all of these just bolster-related catastrophes at the end of polls, you know, it's tough to avoid these, but it is doable. And it's the kind of thing with spacing out crowd control right for the end of polls that really teams like Wunderbar are able to do. They were able to win it here at the end with great kiting on the last boss. Zalia here running this route flawlessly, and this route is actually a harder route than we've seen the other healers do. It's a tighter circle around just the Trothak area, and he's able to make it look great. I don't think we've ever seen Zalia mess that one up, and that one is not easy to do. So big props to Wunderbar, big props to that whole team. Really nothing that we can point to in that Freehold run that looked even slightly out of place there. It looked like a textbook run.
That's right, and when they're running on all cylinders, they have everything going right for them. There's just They're just completely an unstoppable force. And, we got to give props as well, Zyro, to Golden Guardians for keeping it as close as they did. Because as they had mentioned before, as both teams were talking about, it would always end up being sweeps one way or another between them.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a better series to have at the end of BFA. I said it before, I'll say it again. These guys have grown so much in terms of just player strength and group strength over the years, and I can't think of a better position to be in going into Shadowlands, where hopefully we'll see something similar in terms of strength and competition.
That's right, and both of them have represented their regions insanely well, looking at how, all of the teams from across the board here, Nagura, as we check out our bracket, have made this weekend so incredible and some of the tightest competition we've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to all of the teams that participated. It's the incredible skill of all of the teams made this such a awesome final to watch, and we've seen so many just incredibly close games between those teams. Some of the games I couldn't even believe, and just 1 second difference, 2 second difference between some of the teams, just incredible on how much those teams have practiced and how well they've executed some of those strategies in dungeons. Just insane seeing some of those incredible pulls in their Taldastars and their Waycrests and the Freeholds. So yeah, shout out to all of the teams, and of course big shout out to Wunderbar for winning the whole thing.
That's absolutely right. What a great bracket. What a great showing from so many teams throughout all over the world at this point. Being able to look at what their potential has and be able to see how far that they can really end up pushing it to the limit. So not only have they put on a great performance, but many of these teams are coming home with some great prizes, as the $300,000 prize pool with $150,000 going to our grand champions in Wunderbar. Golden Guardians going home with $60,000, Deplete from Beyond $30,000, and all three of those teams, by the way, getting some amazing medals like we had showed earlier. So congratulations to those top three, and very big thank you to Perplexed, Ethical, Complexity Limit, the boys, Goosey Bad, for all putting in so much work to make this tournament what it is here, Zyro.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of effort and time going on behind the scenes that these teams have to put in, it's days upon days of relentless practice and so much testing, going over strategies, making sure you're comfortable with what you're running. It's ridiculous how much effort these teams put in, and we can't thank them enough for participating and making it what it is.
That's right. Not only, of course, to our to all the teams who are participating, but also to our production, to our tournament organizers, to the devs as well, for providing the support that they can, so that we can be casting from home. We could be still continuing this production from home with all of the support that they've given us, from stats, from all the amazing graphics that have been coming to work, and making sure we have everything really at our disposal to continue bringing the Mythic Dungeon International to everybody's homes. And we got a lot more WoW esports going on throughout the rest of the year. As August 22nd, the AWC circuit is going to be continuing, so we'll be able to see the best in the world squaring off in Arena as well, and get to see some more great WoW esports action. So if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, be sure to do so down at the bottom, and ring the bell, of course, so that you'll be able to know when the channel goes live next, and whenever we maybe get some more Shadowlands stuff going on. And same YouTube channel for that as well, Dratnos.
Very, very cool. Got to make sure you ring that bell.
Thank you, Dratnos. Any last closing thoughts that you've got, Nagura, as well?
No, just thanks for everyone watching this whole MDI, and I just had a great time casting all of it. And to be honest, I'm a bit sad that BFA is over and we're not going to see any more of these MDIs possibly in BFA. I'm looking forward to Shadowlands though.
Oh yeah,
exactly. So it was kind of sad wrapping up an expansion and all the the experiences with it from a content perspective, but also being able to look at the experiences that you've built with your friends as well. Zyro, what do you think?
And I think everything's already been said. I'm just really looking forward to seeing how these dungeons are going to play out in Shadowlands there. I think we have beta coming next week. Got some Mythic Plus action. I'm looking forward to playing around with that. Super excited for that. But yeah, man, seeing the progression of the BFA MDI series, seeing the players put so much effort in, it's been fantastic to watch, fantastic to commentate. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been an absolute privilege being able to bring this show to all of you. So we wanted to thank you once again for checking it out, for joining us as we switch platforms as well. It means the world to us. Thank you so much for joining us for this year's production of the Mythic Dungeon International. As we wrap up BFA, be well, be safe, be good to each other, and have an excellent night.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft lore video, and this is the big one because I chatted to Ian, and when I was speaking to him, I essentially went in panning for gold, right? Those nuggets of info, like some of the ones he's dropped in the past, that, really get us talking. And today, there's a reason why this video is titled the way that it is, right? Because we're going cosmic, and if you've doubted some of the Cosmos stuff that we've talked about in the past, get ready to hear it from the horse's mouth. Ian really did confirm a number of very interesting, deeply impactful things that are, tied into what we've been talking about. It's pretty damn big. It's going to shape how we all process the lore. It's going to inform the settings that Warcraft explores during and after the Shadowlands. But first, before Shadowlands comes Shadows Rising, and you can pre-order that for free, literally free, ahead of its July 14th release date. You'll get the book for free with today's sponsor, Audible. Down below, give it a click. Seriously, free, and it's yours forever, even if you cancel Audible. Though you're probably not going to want to, because they've got loads of Warcraft books and loads of other audiobooks as well, so it's pretty sweet. Now, audiobooks, they're seriously great. They accompany me on my trip to and up Sleeve Donard, a wonderful mountain in our country. So what a great way to get ready for Shadowlands. And I mean, man, I hear that there are some Sylvanas chapters that really do take the gloves off, which I'm looking forward to. You can't beat free, so hit up my link, order it, give it a shot, give Audible a shot, and thanks for the support, as you'll very soon see things like supporting our sponsors like Audible truly do help us grow and make better content for you, and you'll see some of that soon. Okay, let's get into it. I asked Ian about the first ones. Now, they're a group that was mentioned at the Shadowlands Alpha. Now, we have done a full lore video on them, of course we have, so you can see that, but suffice to say, they are a new group who are, according to Anduin, distinctly not Titan, even though the jailer commented it was a bit wild that we could actually sort of interact with their technology because we're mortals, and it's kind of implied that it's the Heart of Azeroth's fault that we can actually do that. Well, when I was talking to Ian, I asked him where those first ones may fit on the cosmology chart, and suffice to say, I got a deeper answer than I was expecting. Recently, right, we hopped on the alpha and we saw a whole bunch of people mention the first one. So, my question is, it seems the ones that might have made the Shadowlands, or at least a very big bunch of dudes. So, where do you think they might fit into that cosmology chart that you guys have been teasing us with for so very long?
That's a very good question. Who made the Titans? The Titans there to begin with? Who created all of what we're seeing? What is the hierarchy of power in the Warcraft universe? I think what we are seeing, the Titans that we've dealt with in past Warcraft expansions up to now, as we saw face to face at the end of Legion, that was, the pantheon of order that we've seen placed on the cosmology. As we go to the Shadowlands, what we'll be learning is that there is a pantheon of death. And if you think of people like, or beings like the Archon in Bastion, Denathrius in Revendreth, the Winter Queen, these are effectively to the Titans that we know in our world that we have interacted with, but they are the pantheon of death. And the question is, how does the Jailer fit into this? How does the Arbiter fit into this? Those are things we're going to learn. And
that is... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I know. That's just a little nugget. Yeah. And then, is there some higher structure above and beyond that? Those are good questions. I think that's something we want to begin to delve into. Because one of the natural questions that many people asked really 3 years ago now, hey, we just dealt with Titans. We just faced off against a manifestation of Sargeras. Where do we go from here? Well, that's something we need to start exploring.
And I mean, just wow. First, let's process the Titans, okay? This confirms the Titans were not the first sentient beings in existence, right? They did not create it all. Ian then asks us, who made the Titans? Good question. And he asked them that as a part of a response to a question about the first ones. So, could it actually be that the basic infrastructure of things is actually created by the first ones? Was, I suppose. And, maybe more than just Titans, right? Like everything that we see, all the different realms. And presumably, this would mean that all those other realms of existence, aside from the material, were also created by whatever group that is. Now, one assumes that then maybe the likes of Fel and Life were also maybe creations of this very first group. And I've got to wonder, right, if you've got the old gods and then behind them the Void Lords, then are the Titans at the same tier as the old gods, with there maybe being a greater power in the sort of realm of order or arcane, behind them. But then we've got to think, well, was it actually one creature or being, deity that created all of these different forces and groups, or was it a group of them like the first ones, or did somebody make the first ones?